Welcome to the Music Education Podcast. I'm Chris of the Chris Woods Groove Orchestra, and this podcast is brought to you by the Soundstorm Music Education Hub and our sponsor, Longy School of Music. One of my favourite things to do on this podcast is simply having an authentic conversation with a practitioner, and that is exactly what this episode is. It's a chat with musician and music educator Jack Grace, and it includes words of wisdom such as...
And I think the minute you try and enforce what you think music is then when the creativity of the young people gets stunted.
It's packed full of wisdom just like that, and ideas for you to use in sessions. And let's be honest, sometimes it's just really nice to hear another practitioner and what they do. I hope you enjoy listening. Jack, thanks so much for joining me. Can we start off with who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name's Jack Grace, and I'm a music practitioner based out of Bournemouth, and I do a variety of different sort of roles. I work predominantly with PMLD and SEN format, but I also do music communication and sort of exploration with people in recovery as well, which is another sort of hat that I wear. But that's kind of the gist of the broad strokes anyway of what I do.
Fantastic. Okay, people in recovery. Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting thing to get stuck into, because that's something that we've not really discussed much on the podcast.
Cool.
So far. But I mean, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. As I was saying to you before we sort of hit record, my inspiration to talk was seeing a really beautiful project you were doing with Soundstorm.
Thanks.
Do you want to give us a summary, an intro of that?
Yeah. So I spent, it took 18 months to do, but it was 10 months of delivering 20-hour workshops to 6 SEN schools in BCP sort of catchment area, with the regards of trying to get young people playing instruments that they want to play rather than like the kind of tokenistic, here's a shaker, here's this. So if people are like, I want to play drums, I want to play piano, like being able to facilitate that. And then out of that process, sort of doing songwriting with them and doing like songwriting games and workshops that I've sort of developed over the years. And then bringing in my recording equipment towards the end of the 20 hours, sort of 10 hours in terms of workshops and then another 10 hours in terms of recording. And then with those songs that we'd written, recording them and then putting together as an album. So there was 10 songs total, but 6 that made the album because there was 6 schools. So yeah, which was amazing. And then we got to do sort of it be debuted on radio at Victoria School, which was really cool. And then the sort of documentary, I guess, that was done by Soundstorm was played at the Lighthouse Showcase at the beginning of July.
Yeah, I think that documentary was, it was super short and just, I mean, almost more of a sort of a montage of it, wasn't it? But yeah, just painted quite a profound picture. And I really enjoyed and interested in the end product as well, which maybe we'll skip to in a moment. But what sort of needs and abilities were you working with those students? Because you're talking about, you said specifically like instruments that they want to work with, which is that based on physical limitations where you might immediately think that person wouldn't be able to play kit drum, for example.
Yeah.
But actually you're making that happen.
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
So this sort of spectrum in terms of the young people that I was working with was everything from, like autism sort of level 1 and 2, all the way up to like PMLD with young people who are sort of wheelchair users and bed users, and being able to facilitate their need whilst also facilitating everyone. So there was no like only a certain catchment of young people can attend, I was like, I want everyone and anyone to be able to attend, because the idea behind my practice is it needs to be as inclusive as possible, that it can work in a mainstream education all the way up to like university level, and then also have then the scope for it to then work in an SEN environment. So that was really important for me to be able to keep that and maintain that, because that's a real big driving force for me and my practice. And that's, I think, came across in the work, because it's working with the teacher or working with someone that knows the needs of the young person really well. And lucky enough, like I've worked in some of these schools before, so I've got a really good relationship with some of these young people and kids. And I've done the legwork sort of beforehand and sort of trial and error of like what worked, what didn't work. So I had that beforehand on a few schools, but then some I was literally just coming in and being like, what do you like? You know, like what are you interested in? And some people are like, yeah, I like electric guitar, but have never played guitar in their life. So it's like getting them to be able to play and have, because really ultimately it also comes down to like they need to be enjoying it. They need to have fun, because the minute they're not, then it's like a chore to do it. And like music should never be a chore. Like it should be like, it's the reason I get up every day, and that's what I want for young people as well. So that's really important as well. So it's just sort of sometimes thinking outside of the box. They might maybe it's that they like the sound of drums, but they can't, maybe like because of limitations, not necessarily because of disabilities, but just because of like time frame and stuff, like miking up a drum kit and stuff. But like I'm lucky enough that I've been as a recording artist for like 15 years now, and I have heaps of samples and libraries and stuff from doing that for many years. So it might be that we load drum sounds onto a keyboard and they actually play it in themselves, but all the music that was captured was all done by young people. Like I wasn't there like, oh, I'll tart it up, I'll do this. It was like anything that was recorded, which meant there was over 1,000 tracks of audio for all the schools across 82 children total. It was like a lot. But it was great.
I like your term, tarting it up. I think, and yeah, you can't really tart up 1,000 different audio tracks, can you, particularly successfully? But I mean, that's a really interesting point there in itself, that idea of the end product and how much you tart it up. I think especially if you're working with students who aren't basically, you know, accomplished musicians already. So you're working with people who maybe have never like played a note before, and you're saying, we're going to write a song. And I think that there's a big ego thing in there, right? As a sort of a practitioner of going, well, I've got to go back and go, this is what we did. Yeah. And I know, because I was there for the whole thing, that even though this sounds like, you know, just atonal mess, but I know that the whole process was beautiful and everyone's was so engaged. But I need to explain this to people, and that there's just so much there, isn't there?
There is an element to that, but that's kind of part. I think I struggled that in the early years as sort of when I was embarking on this as a career. But what I learned more was that the more that the young people are engaged and the more the young people like it, whether it's, you know, me from like a trained background in music, but at the same time, like I continually strive in my own music that I make to have these elements of like unsettling, jarring moments within music. So if that's just happening naturally and occurring anyway, then you can use like your skills as a trained musician to then have that as a bed, and then maybe like steer it in a way that like I would do like chord writing. I call it chord safari, where you basically you would choose a key and then you'd have all the chords available, and then you play a game where you get them to choose the chord progression by just playing the chords, and you're like, do you like this one? And it's always 9 times out of 10 everyone loves the diminished chord, like, and it's just like, okay, I gotta make this work somehow, and you know, like in a conventional way. But also I think just throwing convention out the window is also like how some of, you know, whether it's working with children or working with professional musicians, is when some of the most interesting work happens. So just being open to the process and letting the young people steer it, because they will steer it in a direction of which they want, which is then really inspiring for me, because then I'm not coming away just having written C, A minor and F progressions for 10 months, you know. So in that sense is fun, and just having it as an open spectrum, really. Just like there's no such thing as a bad note, because if they're like, I love it, then it's like, that's way more important than my ego of being like, to, you know, the head teacher or the whoever it is at Soundstorm that's hearing it saying like, yeah, so they really like this really horrible note, hence why it's in there. It's just like, that's not my priority. Do you know what I mean? I'm there to facilitate for the kids. So, and as it happens, no one was like, yeah, our song's a bit weird, Jack. Like, can we make it, can we make it nicer? Like, everyone loved it, and it was across the board, whether it was like the head teacher or whether it was, you know, the guys at Soundstorm. Like, the feedback that I continuously got from this whole process was just like, this is amazing. And then to hear it like in its entirety, like all the way through, was quite like an emotional thing. Because like I said, I worked relentlessly on it for like, I was doing 2 days a week in terms of like actual facilitating the workshops. So I would do like 2 to 3 hours at one school, break, travel, another school, 2 to 3 hours. And that was Tuesday and Friday for 10 months. And then I would then come home, and then while it's fresh, like get the ideas that we've been working on. And because like sometimes there might be like a section that's really, really good. There was consistent playing. And there might be a bit that wasn't, you know, keeping time as well, which then affects everyone else's ability to like record on top of that. So it's then just finding like little nuggets and little loops and sort of piecing it together, but still maintaining that it's the young person's song, not me. Do you know what I mean? So there's a real like fine line. And I feel on the whole, a bit of being
a producer, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, you're producing their work and you're capturing a vibe and a feeling rather than necessarily
that's
mechanics.
It. And each session would start with like whatever I'd done, I would play it back and say like, do you like it? You know, because there was a couple of times where like I had moved, like just so it was in my head, a more like consistent transition. And they're like, no, we liked it like the other way. And so then just change it back. And then you build on that, you know what I mean? Because like I'm thinking like, if all the songs are like 8-minute long, you know, wizard pieces, then it's gonna be a long process when we did the radio launch, because I knew we only had like 45 minutes. So I was also trying to keep it, but it didn't work. And like, I wasn't conscious of time at any point, because when I actually like pieced it all together and with the interviews and stuff, I was like, oh, this is great. You know, it worked out really well. So it just, I'd done something like this before, obviously like recording with bands and like working on my own music and stuff. But it was like the first time that there was like an end deadline, you know, because you can't rush creativity. But it was like I only had 20 hours. I only had, you know, it had to be done by like, you know, June. So there was a couple of moments where I was like, ooh, like really feeling the pressure and putting stuff together until the very, very wee hours of the morning to then get up and then do it all again. But I loved it, man. It was great. Like, it might sound a bit cheesy, but like I feel I got as much out of it as the young people did, because it really taught me a lot about like what music is fundamentally. And it is just whether you're trained or not, just this childlike exploration of just finding things that make you happy. So I learned a lot from that. So that was really nice.
Is that partly out of people working with instruments when they might never have worked with it before, or they might have such profound physical, mechanical limitations that you would, again, just go like, probably, mate, guitar isn't going to be for you.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you're going to do it and, oh, fair play, actually. You're saying something that's just not what I expected.
That's it. And I think the minute you try and enforce what you think music is then when the creativity of the young people gets stunted. Like, just like we would do like, right, I do like mood boards at the beginning, like when we're coming up with like lyrics and stuff. And it might be like, you know, we're doing a thing on like things that we like. So someone says like, oh, I really like roast dinners. And it's like, okay, so what does a roast dinner sound like? Do you know what I mean? And then it's like, and then they're like, well, I think it sounds like this. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's amazing. Cause I'm there going like, you know, I can't record roast potatoes. Do you know what I mean? I need sound. So, but it's all about like what their interpretation is around like the kind of stimuluses that we were using. So like each session, as I said, started off with just playing together and just being spontaneous in the room. And then, you know, and again, it's figuring out like what a young person wants to gravitate towards, because some have sensory issues. So something that's like really metallic and harsh might be difficult for them. So then moving to like more like I want to say like organic, but like, you know, like whether it's like hand drums or, I mean, I had access to these thumb bells, which are like a tube that has a hammer and you like shake them and it's like all 12 notes. And I used them a load and they were like, you could just figure out what the key was and then just give everyone in the room one. And then I'm just like, have at it. Do you know what I mean? Like just go wild and you just capture that. And that's like the bed of like what you're starting with. So it's almost like this drone thing. And then it just progressively grew. And then when we started then thinking about like how they wanted the voices to sound, I'd say like, I like to use just very stripped back methods. And then once I show them like delays and reverbs, they're like, whoa, like mind blown. And then all of a sudden everything sounds, you know, like it's underwater. But that's because for them, they've never heard their voice like that. And then I then started playing around with like showing them like what autotune was. And then one group, which was Victoria, like really lent into that in that they actually wanted to use it, not to correct their voice because they weren't singing well. They wanted to use it as like an instrument, which I thought was really cool, because like people would hear autotune and they just assume you're just making it like you're again tarting it up to make it sound quote unquote better. But we were using it in this like really creative way, in that like we had the autotune on whilst recording. So then they were like intentionally like singing in and out of tune so that the autotune was really like kicking in. And it sounded great, you know, and you know, loads of modern musicians use it. And I'm just like, well, why can't we? Do you know what I mean? Like, what music are you listening to? If you're listening to modern music, then that's just it's just a tool now. Do you know what I mean? That people use it. And it's not so much that they can't sing. It's, as I said, it's like a creative way of using it. So I think as long as you're not, as this, like, you know, forcing the creativity, then it doesn't really matter like what convention is. So yeah, like playing around with that. And then I guess like limitations of people's mobility, like you'd have a kick drum and it's like, well, you can't, because we can't get you out your chair. You can't get down and press the kick pedal. But what you can do is I can put the kick drum right up to your chair and you can boot it and I'll record that instead. You know what I mean? And it's like, so, but then drummers are probably going like, you can't kick a drum head. And I'm like, well, I did it. and it sounded great, you know.
That's why it's called a kick drum.
Yeah, that's it. So it's stuff like that, just being flexible and allowing them to explore music in the way that, you know, that probably you and I explored music when we were first discovering it. And it's like that where you go like, wait, open tunings, like bling, and you're like, wow, and like, you know what I mean. And so whether or not, quote unquote, someone can play guitar, you know, they can get notes out of it. So it's just my job to be able to be ready to capture that when that happens. You know what I mean? So it's basically having everything always set up, because they might do something once and it was amazing. And it's just like, it's the same as like raw inspiration. Do you know what I mean? Unless you hear it back, you're like, how did that go? And then you're then sort of chasing the idea. It didn't happen naturally. So that was a big thing that I learned, was just like basically record all the time. And then it's then my job to sieve through 2 hours of audio, but multiple like takes, like everywhere. Like I think there was one track that had 130 individual stems. That's like a full-on production thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's like Jacob Collier level.
yeah.
So yeah, but it was heaps fun. I loved it, and I'd love to do something like that again, because the feedback that I was getting specifically at the Lighthouse was like, parents were like, God, we had no idea that something like this was available, and we'd love to maybe our school could get involved because of timing. And as well, that was the thing, like I'm planning this, but I've never done it. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, I'll do 6 schools, 20 at that. And at first you're like, oh, that seems like I'm going to be sat on my thumbs quite a lot. And then it was quite the opposite. It was like, yeah, this is, maybe I've bitten off far more than I'm able to chew right now, but you just got to do it. You just got to push through it.
Is your music career ready for its next beat? Longy School of Music of Bard College offers a Master of Music in Music Education program online. Longy's top-ranked accredited program is rooted in culturally responsive teaching and designed with the working teacher in mind. Flexible options like asynchronous classes mean you don't have to take time off to pursue your degree. Longy School of Music, located in Boston, Massachusetts, is a leader in centering music as social change, expanding the world's understanding of what a life in music can mean. Our Master of Music in Music Education online alumni go on to do things like advance their teaching licenses, earn higher salaries, found community music organizations, and teach in higher ed. Financial aid is available, so apply today. Learn more at longy.edu/study. That's LONGY.edu/study.
I'm interested by what you've learned from working in an SEN and PMLD scenarios, and then bringing that back to your average state school, because so often in your average state school you might only have a couple of kids who are regularly accessing music anyway.
Yeah,
right. So
definitely I'd done a project at a mainstream primary school where I'd done something similar, but it was just one school. And it worked really well, but it was like, you know, they weren't like able to access instruments all the time. And if they had, they'd only just embarked on that journey. So I was getting like maybe 3 or 4 young people, and I'd give them a guitar that'd be plugged in, and I'd be like, I just need you to just play this note. Just keep playing that note. And once you get like the rhythm of it, and then you then get someone else to play the other note, which is like the 3rd, and then the 5th, then you can start building like chords with it. So I had already kind of experimented with that. And I was like, well, if that can work at like a primary level, where again, the musical journey has just started or hasn't even started yet, then what's to say I can't then apply that with the skills that I've got of being able to facilitate young people with extra need. So I'd kind of experimented with it beforehand, but just not as on a big of a scale. And I don't work all that much with mainstream anymore. I predominantly work with SEN and PMLD these days. So I think what it's just taught me is more to just like trust the process, because each song, every time I started it, I was like, what is this going to sound like? Do you know what I mean? And then 10 sessions later, it's like this whole piece. And it's like the same as when you're writing music. You don't, when you sit down and you pick up your guitar or you're at the piano and you're writing, you don't go like, it's going to sound like this. And I think if that's what you're doing when you're creating music, like, oh, I want one of those, is when music's probably its most disingenuous. Like, just make music. Don't be making things specifically. Unless there's like a brief or something like that. Like if you're, someone's got a vision like for a score or something, then I guess that's slightly different. But for me, when I'm making original music, I don't sit there and go like, oh, I want one of these because that's the hot thing. I just go, just make art, and then it will sound like how it sounds. So that was kind of what I just applied to working with these young people. But then they all had a clear direction of what they wanted to do. It wasn't like we were there going like, oh, well, I guess we could do like a rock tune, or like, some were like, I just want to sing about my friends. And I'm like, okay, like that could be like kind of a campfire vibe. And I'm like, oh, wicked. So I'm then thinking like, okay, so that's probably going to involve like some guitars and some like group work singing and stuff. And then others were like, we don't want to sing. We just want instruments and we want it to be instrumental. And so that's the way that the music steered. And everyone had a clear vision, like after we'd done maybe like 3 or 4 hours of like workshops together. And also like young people had then found like an instrument that they really liked. And then they're like, yeah, I just want to play that. And it's like, okay, well, let's do that then, But yeah.
I think there was, and it's hard for people listening to get this because obviously they haven't seen the little documentary, but yeah, why I was excited by that project and what I picked up from that documentary is the things that you're talking about now, that sort of there didn't seem to be like sort of typical musical expectations. There seemed to be like a freedom to it, an authenticity to it, and it just felt really quite beautiful. But I'm particularly interested by if you're working in that same way of, say, for example, going, here's an open tune guitar. Okay, let's work with one note stuff. Because I know this from my experiences in working in mainstream schools. As soon as you start working very simplistically, like individual notes or without much direction, or crucially without any kind of guidance towards progression of like, you can challenge yourself, you can push yourself, you need to push yourself. Then if that's not there, then people are sort of like, oh, well, this has no value to it because no one's moving. You're not moving. You're not progressing as a musician. And I guess from my perspective, what I've learned as a musician, probably quite recently, really, in the last like 5-6 years, maybe, is that actually that technical progression is really quite a negative thing. And what you captured in your workshop there in SEN is really beautifully musical and deep sort of connection with sound and place and space. But then when you put that into a mainstream school, I wonder if it can function in the same way, even though it'd probably be the best project for all mainstreams to go through, right? But that sort of constant, do you think there's that constant need for progression and development?
There is, and I think if you can break it down to what is it that you're wanting to progress? Are you wanting to progress young people's musical ability, or you wanting to progress and enrich them? So if they're getting something out of playing, whether it's a mainstream setting and they got a young person that loves Metallica and they're just playing Metallica and they're loving it. So what's more important? The fact that they're steering and learning other genres and scales and stuff, or they are so G'd up that they want to continue playing this instrument because it inspires them. And that for me that's the progression. Do you know what I mean? Like whether you can like put it to a scaling or not, it's like you can, because you can do things with around their mental health and their well-being, like before the project and after the project. And like I do similar things at Absolute, and I work with, maybe it's young people that have got high anxiety, or they're in sort of niche groups because like within like community stuff. So that might be they were previously involved with like County Lines, or they're still involved with County Lines, or it could be anything and everything really. And we do like, how did you feel before you started it, and how do you feel after? Whether or not they've like grown in terms of their musical ability, they've grown in terms of their confidence. And that's like, I think is something that's really overlooked, specifically in like mainstream, because, it's all about like the grades and stuff like that. And when I work in mainstream, I've had feedback from teachers and stuff, because I'm not following a curricula. I'm like teaching them like 1, 4, and 5 are your majors and minors in scales and stuff, but like I do it in a different way. And then like after it, like they remember it. And then the teacher's like, I've been trying to teach this to this class for like 9 weeks, and you've done it in your fun little hour workshop. So again, not following what's measurable in terms of progression, they've then progressed, because I'm not tying myself that, I have to teach them scales, I have to teach them this. They're learning it by doing it. And I think that's the easiest way with anything. Like I'm a very hands-on person. Like I learn things by doing it, and so do young people. So like if it worked for me, because with my sort of education journey, I really struggled with like GCSE music, because it was just presented to me in ways that it just didn't connect with me, and I didn't understand. And then it wasn't until I started doing my own independent study around it, and I started figuring this stuff out on my own, or figuring it out in a way that makes sense to me. I'm like, well, if that makes sense to me, then that will probably make sense to other people who are also struggling to hear it. So it's just, I've just applied those things that make sense to me in my workshop, because that's the glory of it being my workshop. Like I get to teach it the way I want to teach it. So I sort of do it in the ways that worked for me, because I knew that in the past that things hadn't worked, and then you get the best results. And so it's like, again, it's just trying, like taking away that thing of like measured success, and more just thinking about it as like the process, and think of it as like something that's consistent and routinal. Because if you're playing every day for like 3 hours, you are going to progress, whether you're seeing it or not. Like it might be that your timing's better. It might be that your dexterity is better. And specifically with the young people that I was working with, progression isn't necessarily always the main outcome, because some of these young people have really severe like degenerative diseases, and it's more about maintaining their ability rather than them progressing.
Okay.
So
because you will naturally see a regression of some kind, right?
So if you're just thinking and focusing on progression, then you're focusing on the wrong thing. And I think that's something that I've taken away from working in SEN and PMLD environments, that like progression is actually maintenance, like maintaining it, that they're still able to do this thing consistently, and that they want to as well. Like, so many young people embark on a musical journey and then put off by it because they're not inspired by the music that they're being told to play. Or, like I know when I first started playing guitar, like I forget what it was that we were doing at school, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. Do you know what I mean? And so I asked them, like, what do you like? What music do you like? And then maybe we can like unpick what that is, because everything's got rules around genres and stuff. And that's why genres are genres, because they've got sort of traditions and nuances within them. And so if you can unpick that as a practitioner, and implement it, and not being like, oh, well, like, oh, so you like rock music, so it's going to be these sets of chords, or oh, you're really into pop music, it's going to be these sets. Like, you don't sit there and tell them that, because that's like, it's either going to make them uninterested, or they might switch off because you're getting too theory heavy. If you just present it in the way of like, so these chords would work, which ones do you like, and let them choose, then that's the best way I've had results. And even when I've done work like songwriting workshops in mainstream, that's the same way as I do it. I just go like a little bit of theory at the beginning, start off in C, A minor. Do you want it to be happy or sad? Cool. Then we'll pick major, minor. And then I'm like, these are your chords. Here's your numbers. These mean this. These work together because of this relationship. And then we just do the kind of chord safari workshop. And it's the same with like lyric writing. Like I do a workshop that's around taking a dictionary, a fact and a fiction book, and we play a game where we just flick random pages open, choose random lines, write that down, choose a random word from the dictionary, write the definition down, and then a random word from like either the fiction or sort of biographical. Write them all down, and then set a 3-minute timer to write 2 sentences that have like those 3 elements in it. And then once you've done those sentences, do it again, but then you're going to expand on the sentences and then make like a paragraph. And then once you've got a paragraph, then expand. And then if you want to do collaborative work, then take someone's idea and another idea and then amalgamate them together. And then by the end of it, you've got like a whole bunch of like lyrics. And then you've removed the anxiety of like being like, right, we're going to write songs, and it's got to be about something that's really meaningful to you. And then young people clam up because they're scared about what the repercussion is of maybe saying something that they really strongly feel about and having the sort of being ridiculed for that. So if you remove that, and then it's not that the lyrics are like disingenuous, it's just like that's a springboard, and then they actually start filling in the gaps themselves. And that's something I actually do in my own practice. Like when I do songwriting workshops with artists that want to record with me, I do that. And then you actually, because of the way you want to associate like thoughts and feelings within your music, like you do just like you see these kind of patterns and you start steering it in a certain direction, and it just happens like so naturally. So again, it's just like, if you're sitting there going like, what are we going to write about? And everyone's like, I don't know. And it's like, you just spend a whole hour just sitting there going, oh, we could write about the weather. We could, do you know what I mean? Just get the ball rolling.
That sort of, that blank page fear, which is interesting, isn't it? Because I always kind of thought that was just an adult thing. But it's not, is it? Like, I think quite young children can be quite daunted by that idea as well of, where do I begin? But you have to be careful, right? Because in all of those stimuli, is that the right word, or am I just making it sound like that to make it sound more academic? By using all those things, you are guiding them in a direction, aren't you? Because like you're saying, like you're called Safari, which sounds wonderful, and I reckon a load of educators are now going to nick that. Yeah, which is kind of cool, but you're not going to get any royalties. No, which kind of sucks. But you know, you're giving them. I'm presuming you work within the constraints of functional harmony. Yeah. So you know, you're kind of putting them in a box there, right? Yeah. To a degree. But it's like, I think it's like when you if you give someone a plain piece of paper and say, draw me something, it's like, what do I draw? Whereas if you give them a plain piece of paper that's got a line on it already, then they might add to that line. They might think, oh, that line could be this. Mm-hmm. So it's just a stimulus to get the ball rolling. It's not like taking away from the fact that they're not creating it, because they're just creating it with like limitations. It's like when you build Lego, right? If you like following instructions and stuff, then the instructions are there to like build it. But if you've like been given only so many pieces, then you'll build something with that. But if you're just given a heap of stuff, you're like, where do I start? You know? So it's kind of a bit like that. Just
making it less daunting to start. And then the quicker you start, the more time you actually get to do playing and writing the music. So the actual like getting the chords and the kind of ideas down, that happens in the first 2 hours, the very first session. So then you've still got 18 hours then of making music. And that could be like, I'll get like a flip chart and I'll be like, we're going to make a character. Do they have big feet or small feet? And they go, big feet. So you just draw massive shoes. And then you'd be like, are they long or short? And then they'll be like, oh, they're short. I'm like, well, do you want to come and draw it? So then they start then drawing this character. And I'm like, after like 10 minutes of doing this, you've just got this mental picture, right? I'm like, what's this character called? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, well, what do they like to drink? And they're like, well, they like to drink tea. I'm like, well, maybe he's called Tea. Is it a he? Do you know what I mean? Then you're just building this character out of nowhere. And then I'm like, well, what do they like to do? And they're like, oh, well, they live underwater. And okay, well, what's their house? It's like, well, they've got a banana for a house. So then all of a sudden you got this character, which is T, the octomouse, who lives underwater and has a banana for a house. That's like lyrics there. So that's what I did with like Victoria. And that was like one of the songs we did. I'm not taking creativity away from them. I'm just sort of fanning the flame to get it going.
Do you think it's similar to the open-tuned guitar rather than giving a kid an out-of-tune guitar?
Yeah.
And going, I don't want to question your creativity, man. Here you go, tune it how you want.
Yeah.
It's going, here's an open D.
Yeah.
Explore.
Yeah. And just, and even within being in an open tuner, you can still play wrong notes. Like,
I do it all the time.
Yeah. And sometimes like the best notes are the wrong ones. And it's kind of steers you in a direction that maybe you hadn't have thought that it was going to go in. And there is a beauty within dissonance. Like I really like dissonance with like my ear appreciates dissonance. So I'm fine with hearing that. And to someone who is untrained, they might not hear it as dissonance. They might just hear it as music. So as long as you're comfortable with that as a practitioner, then you're good, really. There's no wrong answer then. It could just be that it just builds. And it's just down to you as a producer with the producer hat. It's like, how are you presenting that sound? And as I said, like we could sit at the piano and I'm like, what kind of sound do you want? And they're like, I want a warm sound. And I'm like, right, okay, what's a warm? Do you know what I mean? So then I'll pull up like a synth pad and I'll just bring up like a bunch of like ambient pads and I'll just go, just say yes when you hear one. And they just go, meh, change, meh, change. And they're like, I like that one. Cool. Well, we'll do that one then. What notes do you want to use? I'd like these three. Like, don't just give them the whole keyboard, but then at the same time be like, I want you to pick 3 notes that you really like the sound of. And they're like, okay. And they pick 3 notes. That's going to be a chord at some point, right? And I'm like, I just want you to play around with a pattern, come up with a pattern that you can repeat. That's a big thing I always try and implement within music is repetition, because music has repetition. All of the best songs are littered in repetition because then they're catchy. So if you've got parts that come back round or motifs that reappear or have just changed slightly, but the rhythm's different, or maybe the harmony's different, but there's still that thing of like repetition. And then there's your development within it then. So then again, the young people are then like learning these skills by doing it. They're like, oh yeah. Because when I play piano now, I go up and I find 3 notes that I like and they just sit at the piano and then the teacher comes in, they're like, oh wow, like that sounds amazing. But they've learned that if they take 3 notes rather than just hammering down cluster chords, it sounds good. There's development right there, just within that.
Just learning to strip things back.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like when you like, it's like when you look at guitar, there's, depending on what you got, there's 6 strings with a potential of between 21 and 24 frets. It's like, where do you start with that? Do you know what I mean? So I'm just like, pick 1 string that you like and then find 2 notes that you like. That's what I want. They can be as far apart, they could be close to each other. But then you start getting these like kind of pedal notes, these pedal tones. And then if you're in a set key, then just allow them to find the ones that they like. And if they find ones that are really like clashy, figure that out. Like, you're the practice, you know what I mean? You're the professional. It's not their job. They're there to have fun. They're there to enjoy themselves. It's down to me. Like, that's why I'm there. You know what I mean? So it's down to me to make it work, not them. Because if they're having a great time doing it, then that's the best bit, really. That's the bit that means the most.
It sounds like the music educators in all situations should be more producer than educator.
Yeah.
If I think of my understanding of, I don't know, even just watching a million documentaries about your favourite album and what have you, and the producer is there taking the voice of this artist and amplifying it, sort of pulling it together beautifully. It's almost like maybe all of us could do with studying some producers, really, and how they sort of work.
Definitely. I think just going in with zero expectation of what it should be, and then allowing the young people to like almost breathe in it. That's when you get the best stuff. That's when it's just like, it is then really organic. I'm not like going, oh, I would really like a romantic classical piece. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going into thinking I'm going to, record the next symphony of something, because that's not what young people want to make. Some might, and that's cool. If they do, like I had two young people that are like, I want to play violin. I was like, all right, I'll get some violins then, grab some violins from home. And I was like, this note is E. Go ham, They're playing violin, whether it's been like structured or just tuning it so it doesn't matter what they play, it still sounds great. Same as open tuning. But to them, they're like, I'm playing violin. They're not sat there going like, oh, Jack's retuned it for me. It's like I've facilitated them to be able to do what they wanted, which was to play violin. Is it traditional? Is it conventional to do it? No. But what is convention? Especially within SEN and PMLD. You know what I mean? Like, one of my favorite quotes is like, when working with, it's from, I've forgotten who it was now. It said, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And I love that, because everyone, how they present and how their needs are, just because they're autistic doesn't mean that they're all going to be the same. They're not all going to have noise sensitivity. They're all not going to, do you know what I mean? So just treat everyone individual. And that's, again, like a big part of my practice, like as just daily, whether I'm working within, education, or whether I'm working with people in recovery, whether I'm making music myself. It's just like, just be open to it, because the minute you're closed off is when you could potentially miss some really like magic moments.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Longy School of Music, and to Soundstorm for making this episode possible. And thank you to you for listening.